Welcome, everybody. My name is Kathy Christie. I am president of the Stanford Club of Palos, Verdes / South Bay. I'm also the class columnist for the class of 1985. So Kathy Olmsted is one of my wonderful classmates. I just wanted to let people know we have a lot of people attending tonight. This is the first time I've ever run a Zoom webinar. I'm using the Stanford account, so please bear with me. I think we have all our settings figured out, but if there are any hiccups, please forgive us. We have a Q&A section, so if you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A, and you can upvote questions there. So please do that. Please don't put them in the chat, because that'll give us two different places we need to look. So questions should be in the Q&A. Kathy's going to speak for about 40 minutes, and then we will take questions, or Kathy will take questions. And so we'll get started. Hold on one second. Okay, somebody says they're waiting for the host. Okay, I'll figure that out. Anyway, I have known Kathy since college, when we both worked at the Stanford Daily. And when I saw that the LA Times had interviewed her recently for an article about conspiracy theories, I contacted her, and she graciously agreed to speak with us. And so I am very happy that she's here tonight. We have a whole lot of people signed up, and I think it's because everybody's pretty excited about the topic. So Kathy, I'll let you take it from here. If you could tell us a little more about yourself and your path to becoming an expert in this, and then you can go ahead and share your presentation. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Thank you very much for inviting me, Kathy, and all of you for attending. Why don't I start by sharing my screen? Let's see here. And, all right, does that appear to be working?
Yes.
All right, great. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit today about both my path, how I got here, and what my research shows. I want to begin by just taking us back 6 months ago to the insurrection of January 6th, and remind everyone of how many conspiracy theorists were a part of that mob that swarmed into the Capitol. There were, of course, a number of the rioters who were adherents of QAnon, which is the conspiracy theory that the world is run by a cabal of flesh-eating, Satan-worshiping pedophiles that includes leaders of the Democratic Party and many Hollywood elites. There were also in that mob a lot of people who were prominent in the coronavirus hoax movement, who believe that the coronavirus is a hoax that has been perpetrated on publics around the world by governments that want to extend more control over their people. So, for example, the producer of a very popular movie called Plandemic that advances this conspiracy theory was part of the mob. And then everyone who took part in the insurrection believed in the conspiracy theory that the election had been stolen, that Joe Biden did not win by 7 million votes, but that in fact Trump was the real winner, and that they had to invade the Capitol, and for some of them think about abducting and assassinating public officials in order to stop the vote, because they were so committed to this conspiracy theory. So one of the questions I want to address today is how did we get here? How did we get to the point where conspiracy theories are so widespread and so firmly believed that thousands of Americans would actually storm the Capitol and try and stop the democratic process? So in doing this, first of all, I want to define what I mean by conspiracy theory. And then I want to talk about how I got into studying them, because it was not certainly something that I planned on when I was a history major back at Stanford. And then I want to talk about what my research has shown. All right. So first of all, what do I mean when I say conspiracy theory? There's a legal definition of conspiracy, right? So that is set. There's no debate about that. A conspiracy is when two or more people get together in secret to do something illegal. So you need to have all three of those elements. You can't have a conspiracy of one. You cannot have a conspiracy out in the open. You cannot have a conspiracy for good in the legal sense, right? So you need all three of those elements for a conspiracy. So then there's actually a lot of debate in the conspiracy theory community, people who study conspiracy theories, about how to define a theory about a conspiracy. And I tend to define it in the broadest possible terms, which is that a conspiracy theory is an interpretation that posits a conspiracy, right? So it is a theory about a conspiracy. This is a broad definition that indicates, that allows for real conspiracies to happen, right? So you can have possibly, it happens rarely, but you possibly can have a conspiracy theory that turns out to be true. All right, so how did I get into this? Well, it started back with my first book, which I published in 1996. It was called Challenging the Secret Government, and it was my dissertation that I wrote here at UC Davis when I got a PhD in history here. And my dissertation was on the investigations of US intelligence agencies after Watergate, investigations that were conducted by members of the press and members of Congress. And in particular, there was the most prominent of the congressional committees that investigated US secret agencies after Watergate. The most important of those committees was headed by Senator Frank Church, who's pictured here holding a CIA dart gun that they used for assassinations. Senator Church was a Democrat from Idaho, and the committee became known as the Church Committee. And the Church Committee and several other congressional committees and several reporters spent much of 1975 and 1976 investigating allegations of abuses or crimes that were committed by the FBI and the CIA. And they discovered a lot. There's a whole shelf full of reports just from the Church Committee. It lasted more than a year, had 80 staff members, subpoena power, got documents from all the secret agencies, and came up with all of these reports, including one report that documented the CIA's assassination attempts against foreign leaders, including many attempts against Fidel Castro of Cuba, many of which involved the mafia, because the mafia was angry at Castro for essentially kicking organized crime off of Cuba. So the mafia had worked with the CIA to try and stab Castro, shoot him, poison him, blow him up, many different ways. So the Church Committee documented all of these assassination attempts. There was another congressional committee that looked into a CIA program called MK Ultra, which was, most of the documents had been shredded by the time it was investigated, but there were enough documents that remained that showed how the CIA had tested LSD on unsuspecting American citizens, had put LSD in their drinks without telling them at the time or later, so that they never knew that they were the subjects of these mind control experiments. The Church Committee also revealed a lot about FBI abuses and crimes, including the FBI program known as COINTELPRO, which surveilled, among many other Americans, just about every civil rights group and civil rights leader, and conducted much surveillance of Martin Luther King. And the Church Committee report on COINTELPRO, this is a photograph of one of the pages of the table of contents that lays out how the FBI tried to use the information it got from its surveillance of King to discredit him and ruin his reputation with various institutions and individuals. Right, so all of this came out in the Church Committee, and I wrote about this in my dissertation, which became my first book. And what really struck me about these investigations is how they had the exact opposite effect of what Senator Church and other liberals had hoped. Senator Church was this real idealist who thought, if we reveal all of these secret government programs and show to the American public all that we know about US government crimes, then the American people's faith in government after Watergate and Vietnam will be restored, because they will say, look, the government is willing to take responsibility for its mistakes, reveal those mistakes, and enact reforms to make sure they don't happen again. So he was really hoping that American trust would be restored, but in fact, the opposite happened. So this is a graph here that shows, that tracks the percentage of Americans who said they trusted the federal government to do the right thing all or most of the time. So in the 1960s, it was like 2/3 of Americans said they trusted the federal government to do the right thing. Then it started falling because of Vietnam and Watergate. And the arrow there is pointing to the 1970s, when Senator Church was desperately trying to revive American faith in government, and in fact only caused it to slide a little bit further. So that was my first book. It was published by University Press. At the time, I had no permanent job. I was an adjunct at UC Davis. I didn't even have an office. Yet, what really surprised me is after this book came out on the church committee and the other investigations, is that I started getting contacted by people around the country who had read the book. And I discovered that there was a whole subculture of people who read everything there was to read about the church committee because they believed that they were victims of government conspiracies. And these people started contacting me. Some of them sent letters. Some of them sent letters full of newspaper clippings with highlighted portions. Some people called me, and it was hard to find me because I didn't even have a regular office, but they would call the history department office and ultimately get a hold of me on the phone. And they wanted to tell me the stories about how they believed they were victims of government conspiracies. And some of them had, quite logical sounding, plausible stories about how they thought they were victims of COINTELPRO, that they had been at anti-Vietnam War rallies, and they were sure that the FBI had surveilled them and they wanted help getting their file. There were a lot of other people who had less plausible stories. Most of them believed they were victims of MK or other mind control programs. There was one very memorable phone call where the caller told me that what he really needed from me was the name of a trustworthy dentist, because the CIA had planted a transmitter in his molar, and all the dentists he went to were in league with the CIA and said it wasn't there. Right, so I started to get really intrigued with how these government investigations had provided fodder for conspiracy theories about the government, and how Senator Church's reform efforts had backfired. And I became very interested in the line between real government conspiracies and conspiracy theories about the government, and how difficult it was to draw that line and tell when somebody was obviously being crazy or when they actually did have some plausible case for having been a victim of government surveillance or a government crime, right? So after that first book came out, I started getting really intrigued by this. And then I wrote ultimately a book on conspiracy theories in American history. And the main theme of that book is the dynamic relationship between the revelation of real government conspiracies and conspiracy theories about the government. So that book came out in 2009. And then I did an updated edition in 2019 that took the story up to the first couple years of the Trump presidency. So what did I find in this research area that I sort of fell into? Well, first of all, there have been conspiracy theories throughout human history. Scholars have discovered evidence of conspiracy theories in ancient Greece and Rome. In the medieval period, this is a picture showing the blood libel. There was a very lethal conspiracy theory that led to hundreds and maybe thousands of deaths, where Christians in medieval Europe said that Jews were kidnapping their children and drinking their blood for religious purposes, very similar to a lot of the elements of QAnon. Right? So you have conspiracy theories for centuries across different cultures. It's not unique to the modern United States. So there's this long precedent. But historians usually say that what we now know as conspiracy theories really got to be popular after the French Revolution in the late 18th century. So here is the picture of the cover of one of the books that came out that was widespread in Europe and the United States in the 1790s. Because after the French Revolution, a lot of people who opposed the revolution, because they were conservatives, they were landed aristocracy, they were church officials, believed that the revolution had been a conspiracy. And so they started writing books about it, and these books became very popular. So it's really starting in the 1790s that you start seeing the same conspiracy theories and the same conspiracy theory books spread all over Western culture. So in the United States, these French Revolution conspiracy theories were popular. Throughout the 19th century, there were many conspiracy theories in the United States that were popular among various groups. Mostly in the 1800s, these conspiracy theories were populist conspiracy theories that alleged there was some sort of conspiracy against the people, however the people were constructed. So there were anti-elitist conspiracy theories. Like this one shows a book that was very popular that charged that there was a conspiracy of Masons against the real people of the United States. And anti-Masonic conspiracy theories were really popular in the 1830s. There was even several state legislatures had majorities where the anti-Masons controlled the state legislatures for several years. So conspiracy theories about Masons, about businessmen, about Wall Street, about Jews. Increasingly in the 19th century, there were a lot of popular conspiracy theories in the United States about marginalized groups, which in the 19th century included Catholics. So, for example, there were memoirs written by women who alleged to be ex-nuns, like this woman, Maria Monk, that talked about how they had been kidnapped by priests, held as sex slaves, and then their babies, when they were born, were murdered and buried within the convent walls. So again, a precedent for QAnon. So lots of conspiracy theories about minority groups in the United States in the 19th century. Right. So all of that is backstory. What I'm really interested in is anti-government conspiracy theories. And those really became increasingly popular. They overtook the popularity of the anti-elitist conspiracy theories or conspiracy theories about marginalized groups right about World War I. It was in World War I that you start seeing in the United States more and more conspiracy theories that allege that it is the government of the United States that is out to get the American people, not just immigrants or Black people or Catholics or Wall Street bankers, but actually the government itself. And there's a reason for that. That it happens then. That's because it was in World War I that the US government started to get much bigger and to have secret agencies. So during World War I, Congress passed 2 laws that effectively criminalized dissent, the Sedition and Espionage Acts, and set up government agencies to spy on people to see if they were violating these acts. So as the government starts spying on the American people, unsurprisingly, there's more and more theories where people believe that the government is spying on them. So again, you have this relationship between actual government activity or conspiracies or crimes and conspiracy theories about the government. So my book, my own work, starts in World War I. Then I looked at how these anti-government conspiracy theories evolved from World War I to the present. There were many conspiracy theories about war decisions in the 20th century. So after the World War I theories and World War II, there's a lot of Pearl Harbor conspiracy theories. These are conspiracy theories that come from the far right in American politics. A lot of Americans think in World War II, the United States is not fighting the right enemy, that it should be fighting the Soviet Union. And they come up with conspiracy theories about how the US got into a war against the Nazis and the Japanese. And one of the conspiracy theories is that Franklin Roosevelt knew in advance that Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked, and he deliberately withheld this information from the commanders there. or perhaps even provoked the Japanese to attack and then withheld the information. So there's conspiracy theories about World War II. Of course, a lot of anti-government conspiracy theories in the 1950s, with this man, Joe McCarthy, being the primary exponent, alleging that secret communists in league with the American enemy, the Soviet Union, had infiltrated the US government and were secretly trying to turn over the US government to the Soviet Union. There's another really important turning point, though, in 20th century conspiracy theories about the government, and that's in the 1960s with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. This is when those anti-government conspiracy theories start being believed by majorities of the American population. So when Kennedy was killed, of course, as you know, just 2 days later, his assassin was killed. And this provoked a lot of conspiracy theories among the American public. By the late 1960s, there's a lot of best-selling books that allege it was people within the government who killed the president. So the CIA killed the president, or the FBI killed the president, or military generals killed the president, or President Johnson killed President Kennedy. Very popular books. So that by the 1970s, here's a graph of the percentage of people who believe that there was a conspiracy to kill John F. Kennedy. By the 1970s, it's up to more than 80% of Americans. And this is despite the fact that the US government came out with an official report saying it was one guy. Still more than 80% of Americans don't believe that government report. And the majority of the JFK conspiracy theories focus on villains in the US government. So that's the 1960s. By the time you get to the 1970s, of course, there's even more reasons for people to believe there are conspiracy theories. There are conspiracies within the government. The Watergate Scandal, which started out as a conspiracy theory held by these two reporters on the Washington Post, turned out to not be just their conspiracy theory that the Nixon administration was abusing its power in covering that up, but in fact a real conspiracy. So the Watergate Scandal contributes to more mistrust. It contributes to more conspiracy theories about the government. Right after Watergate, you get the Church Committee and those events that I studied. This continues, this trend of more and more revelations about government conspiracies continues into the 1980s with the Iran-Contra affair, which causes a lot more anti-government conspiracy theories on both the left and the right. So that by the time we get to the 1990s, conspiracism has really been mainstreamed, even in American popular culture, so that there are many places you can find these conspiracy theories on TV or in the movies or in novels by the 1990s. Of course, The X-Files is one of the hits of the decade, alleging this vast conspiracy involving aliens and the FBI. This is also the poster for Conspiracy Theory, which is a popular movie in the 90s where Mel Gibson plays a conspiracy theorist, an apparent conspiracy theorist who seems crazy because he thinks black helicopters are out to get him, but it turns out they are. Increasingly, that's a plot line for a lot of pop culture in the 1990s. All right, so now let's take the story into the 21st century. This is initially when I ended my book, as I was looking at 9/11 conspiracy theories. There were 9/11 conspiracy theories that pop up on the internet that it was actually planned by the Bush administration right after the attacks themselves, but they become much more popular after the invasion of Iraq and once that invasion starts to go badly. So that there's a reputable poll 5 years after 9/11 that finds that 1/3 of Americans believe that the Bush administration either deliberately let 9/11 happen or made it happen in order to accomplish their foreign policy goals, right? So a lot of evidence of American distrust in their government, belief in conspiracies within the government by the beginning of the 21st century. So here again is that graph. Once again, this is the percentage of Americans who say they trust the government to do the right thing all or most of the time. And you can see that it's in the George W. Bush administration that percentage falls and doesn't recover up to this to this point, we're at a historic low in Americans' trust in the government. And you have that much mistrust, then of course you have more people who believe in conspiracies in the government. So of course, if we're talking about recent conspiracy theories, we also have to talk about changing media, the way they were disseminated. There are many entrepreneurs who figure out how to monetize conspiracy theories once there's the development of the internet. So this is a picture of Alex Jones. He starts out as on public access TV in Austin, Texas in the 1990s, and then moves to talk radio, and then moves to the internet with his website InfoWars, being very popular and earning him a lot of money because he can then merchandise fear and sell his survivalist gear, for example, or his nutritional supplements to his viewers and readers, and make a fortune. He is one prominent example, but there are many others who start indiscriminately spreading conspiracy theories on the internet in the 2000s. And then, of course, in addition to the entrepreneurs, in addition to the people who have a financial motive for spreading these conspiracy theories, by 2010, 2011, there are increasingly a lot of public officials who figure out that they can strategically use conspiracy theories to get elected and stay in power. And of course, the most famous, notorious exponent of this is Donald Trump. So Trump first got involved in national politics in a big way in 2011 when he was thinking of running against Obama in 2012. And he got attention by making his main issue the question of whether Barack Obama was eligible to be president by spreading the birther theory, saying over and over again in interviews that he was just raising questions, but there was something very suspicious. And then even after he decided not to run that year, he continued to spread these theories. And also to suggest that there were various ways that people could prove that Obama had actually been born in Kenya. And he also suggested that Obama had dual loyalties, if not alien loyalties, and it was some sort of plant from abroad who had been nurtured, chosen and then nurtured to become president, and then destroy the United States from within. And there are many of these theories in Obama's second term in particular, even though we know that Barack Obama was born in Hawaii in 1961 about as well as we know any historical fact because of the documentation and the eyewitnesses and on and on and on. Right? So some scholars of conspiracy theory point to the birther theory as one of the first examples in our modern era of what they call conspiracy without the theory. That unlike, say, the JFK assassination or 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, the theorists are not diving into the evidence and constructing these narratives with footnotes saying this is how I actually think this event happened. Then instead of coming up with a theory, they're just asserting, just saying, I think he was born in Africa, even though there's no evidence at all that he ever was. They're not taking some seed, some germ of truth, and then leaping to some crazy interpretation. They're just saying that it happened. All right, Trump did this with a number of different conspiracy theories. He alleged that he at various times he suggested that vaccines caused autism. I'm just going to go through these quickly because you get the idea that climate change was a hoax. And also that you couldn't trust just basic numbers from the US government, basic facts, that if the government said that the unemployment rate was a certain amount, that was just not true. And Trump would just assert that it was a different number, but also that the Obamacare enrollment numbers were just a lie. And then a lot of conspiracy theories from early on about the elections being corrupt and rigged, that dead people were voting, that undocumented immigrants were voting, and that the elections were therefore unfair and rigged. So all of this is already there. It's prelude to Trump's insistence after the 2020 election that, in fact, he had won, that the election was rigged, and that therefore his followers who really believed that needed to take action to make sure that he was reinstated as the legitimate winner of the election. So that is how we get to what happened in January, is that there have been, over the decades in the United States, these very popular conspiracy theories of all types, but in particular in recent decades, the anti-government conspiracy theories have been growing ever more popular. Mistrust of the government is growing. And at the very least, you can say that this distrust helps to explain the hold of anti-government conspiracy theories on the popular imagination. Now, it isn't just in the United States that this is happening, though. The trust in government is collapsing all over the world, according to pollsters. Brexit is another example of trust in the UK collapsing and therefore leading to major policy changes. So what do we do? How do we possibly combat this? Well, we can talk about this in the Q&A in just a couple of minutes, but here are some websites that I go to all the time. I think that all three of these fact-checking websites are terrific. So if you ever hear something or see something and it seems like a conspiracy theory and you wonder if it's true, if you go to one of these places, they have dozens of reporters whose job it is to chase these internet rumors down. And you can see thorough documentation of where these conspiracy theories began and whether they're true or false. So this is something I always refer people to, because I think that these websites can help arm people with the facts so that they can be certain of their own facts and be sure, at least at a minimum, not to spread conspiracy theories. Also potentially to argue with conspiracy theorists, although that's a tricky matter. The psychology shows that people tend to dig in more, so you have to approach conspiracy theorists in a kind of a roundabout way, not a confrontational way, if you hope to change their minds. But I do think that we need to be aware of this, and we need to be thinking about it and do what we can as individuals to stop the spread of misinformation, because it already has led to violence. And I'm deeply worried that we haven't seen the last of this, that the disinformation will continue, and that we could see some real violent events, and worst case scenario, even over the loss of democracy in the United States. So sorry to be a downer there, but eager to talk with you about this.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a downer, but not surprising. All right, so are you able to see the questions in the Q&A, or I can read them to you?
Let me see. Yes, I can. Let's see.
Okay, you know what? I'll let you read them through, and maybe why don't you read them out loud, and then you can answer them.
Okay. How does the recent potential support for the theory that COVID-19 originated in a laboratory in Wuhan, China, influence or bolster the COVID-19 is a hoax theory and other current conspiracy theories that undermine trust in our democratic institutions? Well, of course, it is deeply worrying, because it could be true. It could be an example of one of these conspiracy theories that turns out to be true. It's my understanding that it's unlikely to be true, but there is some chance that it is true. And if it turns out to be true, then it shouldn't impact trust in the US government, right? Because this is about the Chinese government lying, covering up. But I'm sure it will bolster the general worldview that you can't trust anybody and nothing happens as it seems, and everything is connected. Everything is part of a plan, which of course is the conspiracy theory worldview, which is so damaging. So yes, I'm very worried about that one. Can you comment on the role and influence of the internet and social media as mechanisms for coalescing conspiracy theories and theorists versus cable TV or previous media tools? Also, the role of bots and application of Twitter and Facebook. This is something where there's a lot of great research going on right now. I mean, I'm not a data scientist, so I'm not involved in it. I go to conferences where people present their work. So it's still, the knowledge that we have about this is evolving. But I would say certainly the internet helps to, and social media, accelerate the spread of conspiracy theories. So I'm class of 1985, like Kathy, back in, when we were in college, we were part of the Stanford Daily, and we were sort of like, we were college level gatekeepers, right? And that we could decide what went in the newspaper. And you just don't have gatekeepers anymore. And so since nobody's watching the gates, all of these crazy theories are spreading all over the place. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to distinguish false information from true information. So there is a lot of interesting work being done in media literacy, particularly with children. The European Union has devoted a lot of money to coming up with curriculum that helps high schoolers in particular distinguish good sources from bad sources. And the preliminary results are quite encouraging from those studies. And so I'm hoping that if that works, they can bring it over here. But that, of course, is a long-term solution. If you're helping children learn how to tell what is a good source and what is a bad source, it takes decades for them to be the real influencers in American society. But that is a long-term hope. What's the craziest conspiracy theory that you've covered that actually turned out to be true? I don't know, there's so many contenders. I mean, a lot of them are quite vile, so I don't even feel like I should say them because I don't want to unintentionally spread them. But one that struck me quite recently as being oh, now I'm just talking about crazy conspiracy theories. Ones that turned out to be true.
The ones that turned out to be true. Just the truth.
Ones that turned out to be true. Well, the only two that I can think of are Watergate and Iran Contra. Those are the big examples. Then there are minor ones that aren't as well known about individual congressmen being involved in some chicanery and then being revealed. But, that's it. I suppose there are some people that are hoping that UFOs might turn out to be true, right? There's a lot of coverage of that lately, but there's not very many. How does the recent potential support for this? Oh wait, I already did that one.
Maybe the one by Annie Albers about you kind of talked about it a little bit about what recommendations do you have, if any, for changing the minds of people who believe in conspiracy theories?
Okay, so this is something I've changed my mind on a lot. I used to just be the kind of person that would be like, no, Elvis is not alive. You're wrong about that. But, after going to conferences where people who study, psychologists who specialize in this, they say that's not the right approach to take. That in fact, all of the studies show that if you directly confront somebody and say, no, that's not true, then they dig in. And in fact, if you come back an hour later and ask them, they're like, they score higher on their scale of being determined to access conspiracy theories. They say that's not the thing to do. Instead, What you do is approach it in terms of sources in a respectful way. Don't ridicule them and say, oh, that I hadn't heard that. Where did you hear that? You know, what are your sources for that? Let's look at that. Where did you find that? Huh, let's look at that website. Is that, you know, really you think a reputable website? Let's see where they get their information. And just approach it that way. And also be sure not to get dragged into debates about details. So, you know, instead of saying, no, actually jet fuel can melt steel beams or something, you know, talk about bigger picture issues, or you will just be sucked down a rabbit hole into discussing physical evidence that's just absurd.
Thank you.
Let's see. Where does this cross the line to fraud and sedition concerning the alleged election conspiracy? Well, that's an interesting question, like fraud and sedition in terms of legal terms. I think they are trying some of the rioters on sedition laws. The question is what about the people who incited them? Right. And that obviously becomes an extremely fraught political issue that I don't think the Biden administration wants to touch right now. But that is a very good question. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Given the growing quality of deep fakes and the ability to create the documentation of everything, is there the possibility of conspiracy fatigue? Historically, has anything diminished the acceptance of conspiracy theories? Well, I wish that there would be some conspiracy fatigue, that people would get tired of them, but we're certainly not at that point right now. It seems like they're just getting more and more popular. As far as historically anything diminished the acceptance of conspiracy theories, well, one thing that is in the past when there were gatekeepers. So for example, the Pearl Harbor conspiracy theories were thoroughly examined by historians, and there were conferences and there were peer-reviewed papers. And in the end, the consensus of the historical profession was, no, that's not true. And so it didn't get into the history books. Of course, when you're dealing with the internet or social media, you can't do that anymore. The other thing that diminishes the acceptance of conspiracy theories is security. So right now we're in a very insecure spot, right, with multiple crises. And so that's the worst possible scenario for conspiratorial thinking. And what cross-cultural conspiracy scholars have found is that in countries where people score highest on feeling secure in their society tend to have the fewest conspiracy theories. So think Scandinavia. It's not like conspiracy theories are unknown there, but they're just much less popular because people, you know, don't feel, at least report, that they don't have to worry so much about their day-to-day lives. So you could say that the structural issue that needs to be addressed here is Americans need to feel less insecure about healthcare or the economy or whatever, or education and student debt, that all of this, particularly economic insecurity, as well as climate change and the pandemic, contributes to people's fears and therefore their susceptibility to conspiracy theories. So, you know, like fixing the world would help with diminishing the popularity of conspiracy theories.
You know, if you scroll up in the questions, there's one by Tim Duane. That's the third one down that we, I think it was just voted up, so it popped closer to the top. About, can you comment on the role and influence? Do you see that one?
Oh yeah. Okay, so the internet certainly helped spread conspiracy theories, made them go more quickly, and also social media. There are some political scientists who say actually that the percentage of people who say they believe conspiracy theories is not going up. It's just the number of the people who already believe them are getting more and more intense and fanatic in their beliefs and more inclined to violence. But certainly I mean, we didn't need the internet to spread conspiracy theories. Back in the Middle Ages, the blood libel, all you needed was a rumor, right? And this would lead to hundreds of people getting killed. More recently, Kennedy assassination, no internet, but the people that I studied, they were able to find each other. What they would do would be very, very simple stuff. They would put up flyers in the library, on the bulletin board. Do you believe the Warren Report? If not, come meet in the, such and such room in the public library on Saturday and meet other people who have the same views. And so it became very grassroots. With lots of study groups set up, and ordinary people would send away for maps of the storm drain system in Dallas. And then they would put it up on their walls and try and figure out where the other shooters were might have been hiding. So that's all without websites and without social media, without even email. And the reason that I know about this is because, of course, they wrote letters. So, now you have to use the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, to see how people communicated. But now they have archives, they have manuscript collections and special collections in libraries around the country that have the letters that these people wrote to each other. So it still happened. It still happened to get these grassroots movements that spread their conspiracy theories. It was just harder. Now, any person can do it at the click of a button. And of course, also, there's a lot of foreign governments. The Soviet government was very involved in spreading conspiracy theories about the US government. It's unclear to what degree this was important, because there were already a lot of conspiracy theories about the US government, but the AIDS was created in a laboratory. This was something the Soviets really tried hard to spread. And also various Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories, the KGB planted them all over the world. And now the Russian government is doing the same thing. So again, they could do it before the internet. Now with social media, with bots, they can do it so much more quickly.
Thank you. There's one that's at the top now by Roy Vela. I don't think we've answered that, or I don't think you've answered that one yet, about how detrimental. Do you see that?
Yeah, how detrimental is the fundamental conspiracy axiom that nothing can be trusted, right? I mean, this is the X-Files, trust no one. How damaging is it to science and education? Any recommendations for countering the hypothesis? Well, I guess intuitively or maybe counterintuitively, the way to counter it is education. More highly educated people tend to believe fewer conspiracy theories and believe more in science and in education. But of course, it's a circle there, because how do you get people to be educated if they distrust education? But that's one long-term solution, is to try to improve educational system, particularly media literacy classes. But yes, I think nothing can be trusted. I think a cynical approach to the world can be very damaging. Skepticism is very important to democracy. You need to be skeptical, raise questions, ask your government officials, why are you doing that? Tell me the truth. But if you become cynical and just say, oh, they're all crooks, then you don't vote, and also you don't care if, democracy is in danger. So it's very, very dangerous. Also, obviously, distrusting science is very dangerous at all times, but especially during a pandemic. And, as a professor, I think it's terrible that people distrust educational experts. You should all listen to me. But it's all connected.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I've been trying to dismiss the questions that have already been answered, so we shouldn't get too confused now. So, all
right, there's a question about QAnon. Do they really believe that stuff? I had a couple of students who did research papers on that this year, and who, in part by interviewing QAnon adherents, and they say yes. they say that it appears that they really believe this. Now, I don't think that Matt Gaetz or even Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't think they really believe it. But the ordinary people, the ordinary QAnon followers, they really believe it. And it's quite astounding because, you know, it's Satan worshiping, child eating pedophiles. It's not just that I disagree with the Democrats on their, you know, infrastructure plan. It is, they are killing and eating and abusing our children. So how can you negotiate with a party that is headed by people like that? So it's deeply damaging, but it appears to be widely and truly believed by its adherents. 23% of Republicans, the poll last week showed, 15% of Americans, 23% of Republicans agreed with the statement that the world is governed by this cabal of Satan worshiping pedophiles.
Wow. Thank you.
All right, which news sources do you trust and which news sources do you mistrust? I would say that I read so many news sources every day. I mean, like I really have to call a time limit or I could just spend all day on the internet. But, you know, I read all the standard ones, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post every single day. I like Fox, I like The Guardian, I like The New Yorker. Even the Wall Street Journal has a very conservative editorial page, but has great reporters. I think that what you need to do is look for news sources where the reporters have a commitment to finding the truth. And that doesn't mean they don't make mistakes or that they don't have some sort of internal bias, but they are trying to find the truth. So, but you know, there are some news sources on both the right and the left that are just pushing an agenda. And so those are the ones that I generally stay away from unless I'm looking for sources for my own research, not for sources to understand the world, but to understand what's happening with conspiracy theories. Let's see, I'm a psychiatrist, and when I hear this, I think about the clinical definition of a delusion, a fixed firm belief despite all evidence to the contrary. Where is the line between a delusion and the mental illness sense of the world and believing in conspiracy theories? I find that question fascinating, and I've been trying to answer it for 25 years, ever since I got the call from the guy who had the transmitter in his molar, right? Because he obviously needed some medication. But there also are people who do have FBI files just because they went to a protest once. And so their belief that they were spied on by the government turned out to be true. So, you know, scholars of conspiracy theory try really hard not to pathologize conspiracy theorists, to try to understand where they're coming from. And so there isn't so much discussion of mental illness, although you can certainly see that if you talk to conspiracy theorists anecdotally. But most scholars of conspiracy theory emphasize that people who are inclined to believe in the paranormal and the supernatural, if they believe in ghosts, for example, they're more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. Does history suggest that the damage of conspiracy theories is self-limiting, or will they just go away after a while? Well, sometimes they just go away. I mean, like, think about JFK. It was really popular for about 30 years. And then, you know, a lot of people who were really committed to it, you know, got old or passed away. So it's not nearly as prevalent as it used to be. I think the same thing will happen with 9/11 theories, or has already happened with 9/11 theories. But it seems like there's always something new to replace that. You know, that's what my survey of American history has shown is over and over again. There's, okay, this theory recedes, but then this one becomes very popular because of whatever is important in that cultural moment. All right, and
just a couple more because we're gonna try to end it at the hour. So
okay,
maybe
I try to support the fact-finding orgs, contributing to the Pointer Institute. Snopes is not a 501c3. Which organizations would you recommend that I support? Well, you know more than I do. So I'm glad to know that you contribute to the Poynter Institute, and I will start doing that. I would say that in general, a lot of, I mean, those are all great and they need to happen. What I'm aware of more is people in universities or think tanks who are working on this. The European Union has a fantastic program where they have brought all the conspiracy theory experts from all over Europe to work together and put together a website of resources on what conspiracy theories are and how to combat them and what the history is, and a bibliography of reading lists. It's called Conspiracy Theories or theory.eu. So that's not supporting it, but if you're interested in looking at another website that has a lot of good fact-checking evidence, I would recommend that one.
I'd also like to add, Poynter has some classes, some online classes for seniors and for teens, and anybody can take them, about how to distinguish fake news versus real news. And they're very well done and very inexpensive.
Oh, that's great. All right, Karen. Hi, Karen. She asked, can you talk about your next book? Is it about a conspiracy theory? What are you researching now? No, actually, it is not about a conspiracy theory, except to the extent that the people that I write about were intense anti-communists who believed that communists were taking over the world. But it is tentatively called, I'm fighting with my publisher about this, it is tentatively called The Newspaper Axis, 6 publishers who courted Hitler. And it's about 4 American and 2 British newspaper publishers who were very much in the isolationist and appeasement camps, who gave very, very favorable coverage to the fascists and then fought against intervention in World War II.
Okay, thank you. We still have another 2 minutes. Are there any other questions there that you want to attempt, or a couple more?
Okay, sure. Let's see. Have you found any correlation between impaired mental health diagnosed or not a conspiracy theory? Again, this is something that anecdotally I have found when people, I had to walk away from this for a while, because I would give book talks and I would be confronted by people who clearly, needed some medication. It was quite disturbing. I don't have public social media for that reason, because I don't want to be easily contacted. I still get crazy emails almost every day, but emails are like one more step. It's an obstacle to a lot of people. So I don't want to make it easy for them to contact me. However, the research shows that it's not really that related in the broad sense. When you have a really popular conspiracy theory, obviously not all those people are schizophrenic. It's something about the culture that leads large numbers of people to believe these conspiracy theories. Is there actually a new field of study emerging to people binging on conspiracies? Yeah, there's a lot of new research out there right now looking at people who are, addicted to internet conspiracy theories and spending all their time on it. The real problem is then when they leave the basement, right, and start storming the Capitol.
Yeah. You know what? I think we should end there. It's 7:59. So thank you so much. We are recording this, and so I will be posting it somewhere, and I will send a link to the people that have signed up for this. So keep an eye out for that. And again, thank you so much, Kathy. It's nice to see you after, I don't even want to say how many years, and hopefully I'll see you at our reunion. So, all right. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to everybody who could attend. I really appreciate it. These were great questions, and I think we all learned a lot. So, all right. Thank you. Everybody have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.